The President, please be seated. Very good morning, everyone. On behalf of the trial chamber, and as the President of the trial chamber, I would like to warmly welcome the co-prosecutors, lead co-lawyers for the civil parties, and counsels for the accused who are present today. The trial chamber is scheduled to conduct two separate hearings today, a hearing today and another for tomorrow's session. The first hearing is meant to consider the comments by the experts reappointed by the trial chamber to review the health and fitness of Mr. Nguyen Chia, the report of which has already been submitted to the chamber very recently. Document E256. The second hearing today, which is a subsequent hearing, is scheduled to be conducted this afternoon or tomorrow morning. During the second session of the hearing, the Chamber will provide opportunity to parties in case 002 to comment on the impacts or the result of the expert report concerning Mr. Nguyen Chia's health and fitness to stand trial, and also the severance of the case, the decision of which is to be rendered in due course. I may now declare the hearing open. Greffier of the trial chamber is now instructed to report to the chamber on the status of the parties to the proceedings today, including the experts appointed by the trial chamber, document E256. The Greffier. Good morning, Mr. President, and thank you, Your Honors. Today, the 25th of March 2013, every party to the proceeding is present except Mr. Nguyen Chia, who is present but in his holding cell. The two experts the chamber are going to hear their testimony are present in their waiting rooms, awaiting call from the chamber. The two experts have already confirmed that they have not been in any relationship with any of the civil parties or the accused. The experts will take the oath before the chamber in a moment. The President, thank you. The Chamber wishes to also inform the parties to the proceedings that Mr. Nguyen Chia is present through remote participation because of his health concerns. And according to the report by the treating doctor at the Khmer Tribunal, he emphasizes that Mr. Nguyen Chia has high blood pressure and cannot remain seated for a long period of time because he feels dizzy. For that, the trial chamber allows him to be excused and that he is now asked to observe the proceedings from his holding cell. The reasons behind this decision are plausible, so Mr. Nguyen Chia is now permitted to observe the proceedings from there. AV booth officers are now instructed to ensure that the AV equipments are properly connected to the holding cell where Mr. Nguyen Chia can observe the whole proceedings. And indeed, these proceedings are normal as what we have already done in the past. Regarding hearing number 1, the trial chamber would like to also note that its decision dated the 15th of November 2011, document E115/3, the chamber ruled that Mr. Nuon Chea is fit to stand trial. The experts are reappointed to review the health and fitness of Mr. Nuon Chea by the trial chamber because the chamber noted that Mr. Nuon Chea on several occasions had requested that he be excused and that he be allowed to observe the proceedings from his holding cell through video link. For that reason, it is really important and fair that Mr. Nuon Chea should be his health and fitness to stand trial conditions are reviewed and assessed by the experts. And on the 13th of June 2011, document E62/3, the experts already made their point concerning their assessment on one occasion back then. And during the hearing on the 31st of August 2011, matters concerning his health condition and also treatment also been discussed. The trial chamber would like to also note that through the order issued on the 18th of December 2012, Professor John Campbell, Dr. Sina Fasel, and Dr. Hood Lina were appointed to assess the fitness to stand trial and the health conditions of Mr. Nuon Chea and Ieng Sari. At that time, the chamber also requested that the parties concerned submit their submissions concerning the scope of the assessment and that such submissions should be filed no later than the 21st of January 2013. Due to the fact that Mr. Ieng Sari passed away at the hospital, Cambodian Friendship Khmer Soviet Hospital on the 14th of March 2013 after he had been admitted to the hospital on the 4th of March 2013. For that reason, the trial chamber hearing today focuses more on the report submitted by the experts after they had reviewed the health and fitness of Mr. Nuon Chea alone only. In response to the trial chamber, counsels for Mr. Nuon Chea submitted their submission requesting the chamber to review and assess some health implications and make sure that the assessment is meaningful, and the symptoms that the council wished the experts to reassess include dizziness and fatigue and problem reading, because Nuon Chea complained that he could not read beyond 5 the 6 lines, for example. And third, that Mr. Nuon Chea has eyesight problem. And fourth, Mr. Nuon Chea has some short-term memory. And fifth, he has problem concentrating and also has problem with time orientation. And sixth, he has some problem like urinating problem because he on some occasions urinates irregularly, and he continues to be fatigued, and he also has problem. He feels uneasy moving his head. And there are a few more points that stated in the application by counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea been well received by the trial chamber. The trial chamber also receives request by the co-prosecutors asking the chamber to assess the mental and physical fitness of the accused person, document E256/3. The trial chamber also informs the witness support section, the VESU unit, in short, informing the section that the chamber would like the experts to be reappointed to review the health condition and the fitness to stand trial of the accused person. At that time, Dr. Huot Lina said that he would be available and present during the proceeding when health of Mr. Nuon Chea was to be reviewed, and the trial chamber agreed to appoint 2 national experts, medical experts. And finally, the chambers assigned 2 experts, rather, Dr. John Campbell and Professor Dr. Sina Fassel, to review and assess the fitness to stand trial of the accused. And noting that later on Dr. Huot Lina was not available, so these 2 experts were the only experts who conducted the assessment on health condition and fitness to stand trial of Mr. Nuon Chea. In the reports filed by the experts, the chamber has now gathered enough information to rule upon the condition of Mr. Nuon Chea, and the chamber will discuss this matter in a moment. According to the provision provided, the hearing is to be conducted in public as much as possible. However, the chamber is very mindful of the rights to access to information and the rights of the accused. Nonetheless, today's hearing is meant to be in public. If parties would like part of the proceedings to be held in closed session, they should do so in writing, and the chamber will rule upon the request in the interest of justice to see whether the hearing shall be conducted in closed session or in public. We hope we have made this clear to the parties to the proceedings, and indeed regarding the privacy of the accused person, the chamber may consider holding the hearing in camera. And also we balance the rights of the public to access to information. The chamber would like to ask counsels for Mr. Nuon Chea to see whether they agree that this following session will be conducted in public.
Mr. President, good morning, Your Honours. We agree that this hearing should be held in public in principle. However, there might be specific medical details that we might not be very specific about, if you get my drift.
The President, thank you, Counsel. The Chamber wishes to also inform the parties to the proceedings that during today's hearing, when the Chamber examines the reports by both experts, the Chamber will be putting questions first to the experts, and the floor will be given to counsels for Mr. Nuon Chea subsequently. Later on, the Chamber will hand over to the prosecution and the lead co-lawyers for the civil parties to be able to put some questions to the experts. And finally, the Chamber will also give the final opportunity to the co-lawyers for the accused to have the final words if they would wish to do so. The final submission by by counsels for Nuon Chea will be allowed. At the same time, co-prosecutors and lead co-lawyers for the civil parties would also be allowed opportunity to do accordingly. The President, court officer is now directed to bring in the experts, please. The President, very good morning, Mr. Experts. First of all, I would like to put a few questions, in particular to Professor John Campbell first. Mr. Professor, is your name John Campbell?
It is.
Thank you. How old are you, Professor?
67.
Thank you. What is your nationality?
New Zealander.
Thank you. Where do you live?
In Dunedin in New Zealand.
Thank you. What is your occupation?
Professor of Medicine and Physician at the University of Otago and the Dunedin Hospital.
Thank you. According to the report by the greffier of the trial chamber, you are not in relationship with any of the of the parties to the proceedings, including the civil parties and the accused person. Nguyen Chia. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The President, Professor, according to your recollection or our recollection, you appeared before the chamber to give testimonies in case file 002 on 3 occasions already. One on the 29th of August 2011 and the 30th of August 2012 and another one on another occasion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The President, thank you. We would like to proceed to put some questions to Dr. Sina Fazel. Is that your full name? Sina Fazel, is that the way your name is spelled?
Yes, it is.
Question. Mr. Fazel, how old are you now?
44 years old.
Question. What is your nationality?
British.
The President, thank you. Where do you live and what is your occupation?
I live in Oxford in the UK and I'm a forensic psychiatrist based at the University of Oxford and the local hospitals in Oxford.
Thank you. Dr. Fazel, according to the report by the Greffier of the trial chamber, you are not in a relationship with an accused or a civil party to the proceedings. In particular, accused person Nguyen Chia. Is that true?
That is true.
Thank you. To the best of the chamber's recollection, Dr. Fazel, you have been involving in the in giving testimonies to the chamber on 4 occasions at this court, the latest of which is on the 8th of November 2012. Is that correct?
I can't remember the exact date. I think it may have been October. The last occasion I was giving testimony in the court, but yes, I have given testimony before in the court on a number of occasions.
The President, thank you very much. The reason the chamber wished to inform you of your presence during these hearings is because we would like to cut short questions concerning your qualifications. So by referring to the records that you already been here on several occasions, the chamber has grounds to confirm that you qualified to give testimony before this chamber. According to our internal rules, you are supposed to give the oath before the chamber, before you give testimony. Are you ready to do that?
Sure.
Mr. Matteo, could you please administer the oath-taking session to the two experts?
Good morning. Professor Campbell, please repeat after me. I solemnly declare that I will assist the Chamber honestly, confidentially, and to the best of my ability.
I solemnly declare that I will assist the Chamber honestly, confidentially, and to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Dr. Fazel, please repeat after me. I solemnly declare that I will assist the Chamber honestly, confidentially, and to the best of my ability.
I solemnly declare that I will assist the Chamber honestly, confidentially, and to the best of my ability.
Thank you.
The Chamber wishes to advise the two experts. The President, the Chamber wishes to advise the two parties that any expert may respond to the question put by any members of the bench. If you feel necessary and the question is of natural, of a general nature. However, if the question is directed to any particular expert, then you may respond to that question accordingly. And the same is for the parties. When they put any particular question to the expert, then the expert in question should respond to the question. However, the other expert may add additional comment. That is the general procedures in relation to your response to the various questions put by parties as well as members of the bench. And to proceed, I now hand over the floor to Judge Civil Cartwright to put the questions to the two experts in relation to the assessment as well as the report by the two experts submitted to the Chamber. You may proceed, Judge.
Thank you, President. I will start by reviewing the previous examinations that either of you have made of this accused, Nguyen Chia, because we are well aware you have both been here on previous occasions examining other accused. Professor Campbell, I think that you examined Nguyen Chia previously on two occasions in 2011, providing the court, as the President has said, with a report on the 25th of August 2011 and subsequently being examined by the court and the parties on that report. Is that correct?
That is correct, although the date I have on my report is the 13th of June 2011.
Yes, that's accurate. Now, you have more recently returned to Phnom Penh to examine Nguyen Chia, and that has been recorded in your most recent report, which has now been filed and is before us today for examination. And that is the report dated the 20th of March 2013, prepared in conjunction with Dr. Sina Fazel. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Dr. Fazell, can you tell the court, please, whether you have ever previously to this most recent examination examined and reported on Nguyen Chia?
I have not.
Thank you. Now, in respect of the present report, it covers two major areas. The first I will loosely describe as Nguyen Chia's physical condition, and the second is his mental health and cognitive status. So I'm going to deal first with the physical aspects of Nguyen Chia's health status. Starting at his age, according to the records that the court holds, Nguyen Chia was born on the 7th of July 1926, which makes him 86 years of age now and 87 in July. Is that as you have recorded for your own purposes?
Yes, that has been our understanding.
Thank you. Now, in your report, you helpfully list the various physical conditions which you consider to have an impact on Nguyen Chia's health. The first you list as cardiovascular disease, and you report a history of hypertension going back over 30 years and ischemic heart disease. You also note that he's on treatment for heart failure and at present that his cardiovascular disease is stable. In reaching that assessment of his health, you looked at other earlier records of Nguyen Chia's health status, I assume. Can you just very briefly, we don't want to go back over the many dozens of health reports that you have examined and that are held by the Chamber, but just very briefly outline what assessment of previous clinical records you undertook.
We had the reports from his doctors. We also reviewed the written material from his hospital's admission, and we visited the hospital to review his x-rays and other laboratory results there.
Can you tell the court, please, what conclusions you came to after examining those reports and also examining Nguyen Chia physically during your assessment of him?
Well, Nguyen Chia is a frail, elderly man at present. His frailty is due in part due to his age and his underlying health conditions, but is also due to a considerable degree due to his inactivity over recent years. He's really been taking no physical activity, spends most of his day lying on his bed. So it is not surprising that he's become weaker in terms of his muscular strength, and day-to-day activities have become difficult for him.
Did you observe any changes in Nguyen Chia's cardiovascular state from the time you last examined him nearly 18 months ago in 2011?
No, I did not. His blood pressure is satisfactory. There are no signs of heart failure, and he does not have symptoms currently of angina or ischemic heart disease, or of heart failure, and that he's not short of breath lying flat. But that does not mean that he does not have severe underlying cardiac disease.
Thank you. I'll turn now to Nguyen Chia's respiratory system, and you noted that he had recently been admitted to hospital with acute bronchitis, a diagnosis that this chamber was furnished with by his treating doctors. can you expand on that diagnosis as to what it means for his current physical condition?
He has fully recovered from his bronchitis. He has no signs of chest infection at present. However, the importance of a condition such as bronchitis is that because of his low physical reserve, he is very prone to intercurrent illness, and intercurrent illness has a disproportionate effect on his well-being and health.
Thank you. You specifically referred to the possibility of delirium, which has an impact on his abilities to participate in this trial. Is there any comment you want to make on the presence or otherwise of delirium?
Delirium is an acute state of confusion which can occur at any age group when the person has a febrile illness. As you get older, you are more prone to delirium. In our discussion with those looking after him, it certainly appeared as though he had an episode of delirium at the time of the bronchitis. But the delirium fully resolved, and it is certainly fully resolved with him at present. Normally only lasts a few days and has resolved over that time.
Thank you. Well, turning now to the next physical condition that you assess as contributing to Nguyen Chia's frailty, cerebrovascular disease. You noted, as we have heard previously, that Nguyen Chia suffered a stroke in 1995, and you may recall at the last hearing the diagnosis that you made, or rather your assessment of the diagnosis that had been made in 1995 and subsequently was tested enthusiastically. Would you please explain very briefly about that stroke and whether it has an ongoing impact on his current health status?
He had a stroke in 1995 which left him with a right-sided weakness from which he made a good recovery. There are very few signs of that now. He has slightly brisker reflexes in the right lower limb, which is consistent with a stroke, and he has a slight spastic catch in his right lower limb, which again is consistent with an old stroke. But there is no evidence clinically of any recent stroke, and there is no evidence on the CT scan that we reviewed of any recent stroke. So his weakness now is primarily due to his inactivity rather than any further strokes.
Now, from common knowledge, often a stroke will have an impact on the ability, the mental or cognitive ability of a patient, and I assume we'll cover that aspect when we turn to the overall assessment of his current mental health status and cognitive ability. That is any connection with that stroke back in 1995. Would you confirm that?
Yes, cognition is normally affected if the outer area of the brain is affected, the cortex, or if there are multiple strokes. But there has never been any evidence of that with Nguyen Chia.
Thank you. In this portion of your physical examination of Nguyen Chia, you refer to his complaint of dizziness. Would you expand on that, please?
Dizziness can cover a multitude of conditions, and I think with Nguyen Chia it is primarily due to his unsteadiness when he is standing. He did complain of some when rolling over in bed, and you can get some inner ear problems that cause trouble like that. But normally when that's inner ear problem, there is a jerking of the eyes as well, and there was no evidence of that with Nuon Chia. So I think his dizziness is primarily due to his unsteadiness, lack of confidence when he is upright. There was certainly no evidence of any drop in blood pressure when he stood.
Thank you. Now, moving to the next aspect of his physical condition, musculoskeletal system, could you please summarise for the court the issues arising from what you describe as Nuon Chia's long-standing degenerative back problems?
Nuon Chia does have a long history of back problems, and that's primarily wear and tear between the vertebrae and damage to the discs, cartilaginous discs, which lie between the vertebral bodies. There is no sign in examining his legs and his back of any nerve root compression that's affecting the nerves, or expecting the spinal cord or the nerves running from the spinal cord, the so-called cauda equina. So on neurological examination, there's no sign of any spinal cord, cauda equina or nerve compression. So his back problems are primarily wear and tear, and are best dealt with by looking at his seating or lying position and by minor analgesics. And that is confirmed by the x-rays, which we also reviewed.
Thank you. Turning now to Nuon Chia's gastrointestinal system, you note one issue there. Could you just briefly and without causing too much embarrassment, describe what impact this issue has on his general physical fitness?
He does have a problem with constipation, and that again is primarily due to his inactivity, and this needs to be managed by regular laxatives to ensure it doesn't become a worse problem.
Thank you. And again, in this same part of the examination, you looked specifically at Nuon Chia's vision. Can you tell us what the outcome of your examination was?
Nuon Chia has bilateral cataracts. That means the lens of the eye is opacified so light doesn't get through clearly. Whether he has underlying problems behind at the back of the eye on the retina, it's impossible to tell because we can't get past the cataracts to see. That would require an ophthalmologist. He had difficulty reading ordinary newsprint size print, but could read the headlines on the newspaper that we tested him with. So in terms of written material, it will need to be either large print or recorded so he can play it for himself, or read to him.
And what about the possibility of removal of those cataracts? Did you consider that?
I gather that has been considered and not gone ahead with. His physical condition would not preclude removal of cataracts if that was what was advised by the ophthalmologist. It's not a big operation.
Finally, in this section on his physical status, you addressed the whole question of Nuon Chia's concerns about his fatigue. Could you summarise for the Chamber your findings in that regard, please?
Yes, we considered this to be physical fatigue rather than mental fatigue. Given his general overall weakness and his lack of activity, any effort that he does have to put in, he finds very tiring. The only way to really improve that would be through an exercise program that increased his physical reserve so that day-to-day activities did not require as much higher proportion of his strength as they do at present.
Thank you. Now, you concluded this section with some recommendations. This relates to his physical condition. Could you just go through those recommendations, please, because the trial chamber needs to have a clear understanding of what it might put in place to ensure that Nguyen Chia is as able to participate in his trial physically as is possible.
The first recommendation is that Nguyen Chia use the holding cell within the courtroom as necessary, and that has the facilities there for him. The second, that his physical frailty is likely to increase if he has not got any exercise program to try and maintain his muscle bulk. So we've actually suggested either a physiotherapist or an exercise instructor institute a program for him that could be carried out under the supervision of the detention staff if he is willing to participate. And this would help maintain his physical strength and should also, if he were to participate, improve it. Didn't feel there was any need to change his cardiovascular medications. Problem with constipation we've already mentioned, and that will need to be kept a close eye on. As far as his back pain is concerned, I think that's been managed as best it can with his seating or lying arrangements and minor analgesics. And I've commented on the way that material should be presented to him, either on tapes or read to him, or possibly printed in large print. And also, Nguyen Chia lasted very well through the sessions we had with him. We did not feel there was any need to shorten the court sessions because of his fatigue or concentration.
At the very end of your report, you mention additional proposals for ensuring that Nguyen Chia is as comfortable as possible in the detention centre, in the holding cells, following his removal from the detention centre each morning. Could you just briefly mention that at this stage, please?
He does evidently find the transporting across from the detention centre to the holding cell tiring, and we've recommended that there be a reasonable space of time that he would be transported across early enough for him to recover from the journey before the court starts. And that he have paracetamol, for example, available if the pain in the back becomes troublesome for him there.
Thank you. Well, in summarising this first section on Nguyen Chia's physical health, I wonder, and before we turn to the mental and cognitive health issues, I wonder if you feel able to give a prognosis based on Nguyen Chia's physical condition.
That is difficult. Life is very unpredictable at 86, especially with the underlying problems that he has. And as I said earlier, any minor intercurrent illness will have a disproportionate effect on his overall well-being. At present, from a physical point of view, I felt that he was well enough to continue with the trial. But his prognosis does have to be very limited, guarded.
Well, are you able to be more, are you able to clarify that final statement, more limited, guarded?
it is difficult. One of the questions we ask ourselves is, would we be surprised if this person was not alive in 6 months? And I have to say, in Nguyen Chia's situation, we would not be surprised.
Thank you. Now, we'll move to the evaluation of Nguyen Chia's mental health, prospective cognitive impairment, and, of course, his fitness to plead and stand trial, as you have outlined in your report. Can I just summarise the various assessments and examinations in general that you make before reaching conclusions on mental health and cognitive impairment in relation to Nguyen Chia? Is it correct that first you review all relevant clinical records, going back as far as we have access to them? Is that correct?
Yes, we comprehensively reviewed all the written records that were available to us.
And then, of course, you interview all the medical personnel who are treating Nguyen Chia and those who are not necessarily medically qualified but who assist him, perhaps detention centre staff, on a very regular basis to gain their assessments of his mental health and cognitive impairment.
That is correct. We interviewed one of the treating physicians who's known Nguyen Chia for over a year, and also we interviewed one person in particular in the detention staff who's known Nguyen Chia for over 2 years. Yes.
And then the third limb of your very broad assessment is that you interview Nguyen Chia himself, and on this occasion you did this over intensively over 2 or 3 periods, and you were examining him with a view to considering his memory, the accuracy of his memory, his understanding and his concentration through your personal assessment of him.
Yes, we reviewed Nguyen Chia's mental state on 3 occasions over quite long interviews, and on one other occasion, Professor Campbell, on the 20th of March, also examined him physically for an additional examination. So it was actually over a period of 3 days that examinations were conducted. 2 of those days we focused on mental health and to some extent physical health.
And then the final tool that you use is to conduct screening tests for cognitive impairment, and in this case, and we'll go into the detail shortly, you also conducted some other tests which you felt would be useful in Nguyen Chia's case. Is that correct?
That is correct. We used some standardized tests which assist us in our assessment. They don't replace the assessment. They're purely adjuncts or things that help focus our assessments and guide our assessments.
Well, starting then with the interviews you had of medical personnel and those who assist Nguyen Chia on a daily basis, could you summarise, please, the results of your discussions with those personnel?
Yes. In summary, the information we received from these individuals was that Nguyen Chia's memory was reasonably good. He remembered items, people, facts that went back some time. They didn't feel there was any obvious change in memory. Specifically, they didn't feel his memory was getting worse. And in addition, they felt his concentration appeared to be good. He was able to listen to the radio in his cell for long periods of time. And finally, there was no evidence of any depression or other mental illness from their perspective, and his mood was appropriate, normal, not obviously depressed.
And that was true both of the medically qualified personnel and the ones who attended him daily. You specify one of the detention centre staff in that regard.
Yes, that was a consistent picture that was built up from medical and detention staff, but it was with the medical staff that we asked in much more detail about these issues.
Now, the next portion of your report deals with the review that you made of relevant medical or clinical records. You note that there has been no previous direct assessment by a psychiatrist to your knowledge, but could you please summarise for the Chamber the results of your review of the relevant medical clinical records?
Yes, we noted that two psychiatrists had tried to assess Nunchia in 2009, but were not able to. But they reviewed all the medical records that were available to them at the time and came to the view that there were no symptoms of mental disorder and that his short-term memory appeared to be consistent with his age. So that's on the basis of reviewing the records in late 2009, going backwards. In addition, other medically trained individuals have assessed Nunchia, and although they're not psychiatrists, they have nevertheless commented on his mental state, and in particular, Professor Lafont, who's a cardiologist based in France, noted that there were no signs of dementia in reports that he wrote in 2008 and 2011. There's one other examination which we highlight, and that's from a neurologist who's a Cambodian neurologist working as one of the treating team, and they conducted a test of memory and cognition in February 2011, and that test was normal. So specifically, there was no obvious signs of impairment to short-term memory or attention or concentration based on a simple screening test that was conducted.
And just going back briefly to the report from the two psychiatrists from 2009, was their inability to examine Nguyen Chia for his mental health or cognitive status because Nguyen Chia did not feel that he needed to have such an assessment at that stage?
Yes, that's our understanding, that he refused to participate in the assessment.
You mention in this part of your report the report of Professor Campbell completed on the 13th of June last year. Perhaps we'll come back to that when we look at the standardised tests, because there will be an interesting variation between 2011 and currently, and maybe it's better disposed of there. Now, you specifically, as you have said, assessed Nguyen Chia's mental state on 3 occasions over the 18th and 19th of March. Could you give us some more details concerning that, those assessments, please, the period over which they were conducted, and secondly, your findings?
Yes, we, as you say, conducted 3 assessments of Nguyen Chia's mental state. The first assessment lasted from 10 past 10 in the morning to 11:55. The second assessment lasted about 90 minutes on the same afternoon, and the third assessment was on the following morning and lasted from 9:30 to 11:50, so over 2 hours the final assessment lasted. And we found that Nguyen Chia was able to concentrate well over those 3 interviews. No obvious difficulty. He responded clearly to our questions, did not obviously tire. He was lying in his bed, so we specifically noted he didn't tire mentally or physically, but he was lying in his bed. He remained alert throughout, and was open and cooperative throughout all our interviews, actually, including those 3 that I've just mentioned.
Now, over the next few parts of your report, you go into some detail as to the type of questions you asked Nguyen Chia. Could you summarise your findings that you reached as a result of these questions? Perhaps just very briefly mention the types of topics that you covered.
So there were 3 types of topics we covered. They were broadly trying to look at long-term memory, so memory from many years ago, but also short-term memory, that's memory over the last few hours or few minutes. And in both cases, long-term and short-term memory, we found good evidence that these were well preserved. So we asked questions about Nguyen Chia's childhood, his schooling, his career when he worked, but also we asked questions about the period in the 1970s and subsequent to that. In addition, we asked questions about what had happened on the day of our interviews, what he'd had for lunch, what he had heard on the radio, so questions also about the more recent past. And in addition, we asked some specific memory tests which assess memory over a short period of time, i.e. a few minutes. So this was broadly the areas that we covered, long-term and short-term memory, and overall we felt there was good preservation of both these areas.
Now, by and large, according to your report, and as you have just summarised, you concluded that his long-term and short-term memories are well preserved. There was just the one area where he had some difficulty being very precise. Could you just very much in summary cover that, please?
There were some areas where Nuon Chea wasn't very precise. For example, he sometimes couldn't remember the exact names of some of his family members. We didn't we didn't pursue this in a lot of detail, and it was our impression that it was partly to do with lack of interest and also lack of contact with some of his family members. But on the other hand, there was quite precise recollection of other details in his past. And so, again, our overall impression was good evidence of preservation of long-term memory.
What about his mood? Did you examine Nuon Chea and ask him questions concerning problems with his mood?
We did. This was an important part of our assessment. We asked questions, as I've previously mentioned, of the medical and detention staff about mood, but also we asked Nuon Chea directly about mood, and he did not complain of any mood symptoms. His sleep appeared to be unchanged for some years, and also on examination we noted that his mood appeared normal. Occasionally he laughed during the interviews at appropriate times. He also became upset at one moment at an appropriate occasion, and that's all an indication that the mood is normal, it reacts appropriately, it's not restricted or just depressed. It's on the other hand, it was reactive in medical jargon, which means that it's normal and reacts appropriately.
Turning now then to the tests that you administered, you conducted a number of cognitive tests, which you've already explained are there to help you focus your examination on his mental or cognitive status. And by that I infer that you don't want us to put our entire weight on the findings from those tests. Nonetheless, as the result generally of all of these tests, did they change the focus of your attention from, or change your views on his mental health or cognitive status after your examination of him?
No, the tests were consistent with our clinical examination. They were consistent with also the information received from medical and detention staff, and they were consistent with all the previous assessments and reports that were done. So our view was they're entirely consistent with all the information that we've reviewed and also our clinical examination.
The first of those tests, the Mini Mental State Examination, or MMSE, had been previously conducted in 2011 by Professor Campbell, but you repeated it on this occasion. Is that correct?
Yes, it was previously completed by also a Cambodian neurologist, Dr. Ross Sina, and we repeated it on this occasion.
And that is a test for screening for cognitive impairment. And can you just summarise for the Chamber first the scores and their significance, the scores achieved by Nguyen Chia and their significance in the context of this cognitive assessment, and secondly, contrast the two scores from 2011 and today?
Yes. So the mini mental state examination is scored out of a maximum score of 30. So the higher you score, the less evidence there is of any cognitive impairment. Nguyen Chia scored 28 out of 30 on consecutive days, that is on the 2 days that we performed the tests. And a score of 23 or less is considered to be indicative of cognitive impairment and would normally warrant further assessment. So a score above 23 is not an indication to look any further and is essentially viewed as a normal score. So his score of 28 is a good score for an individual who's aged 86, and within the test within the screen there are tests of short-term memory, which he performed well on. There's also a brief test of concentration, which he also performed well on. So in summary, a score of 28 is normal from our perspective. We would not place any importance on it having changed from 28, from 30 2 years ago to 28, because there is a normal degree of variability. So from day to day, you can change your score by 1 or 2 points, and therefore over 2 years, a decline of 2 points is not of any clinical significance. I'm actually going to ask Professor Campbell to add to this.
Yes, I would certainly endorse that. A score of 28 out of 30, given some of his physical difficulties, for example, his poor sight, was a very satisfactory score, and there was no indication on the MMSE of any cognitive impairment.
Thank you. You went on to administer 3 other tests, which you describe as tests of attention, which form part of what's known as the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Can you describe your findings from those 3 tests of attention?
Yes, these tests of attention measure or test attention in different ways, and Nguyen Chia scored well on these tests. He scored out of a maximum score of 6, he scored 5, which we viewed as a good score, and that's in the context of another test of concentration, which I mentioned is in the mini mental state examination, which he also scored very well in. So overall, we felt that the tests of attention and concentration were consistent with what we saw in our clinical interviews, which was that he was able to maintain good levels, high levels of concentration and attention for long periods of time.
And there was one more test that you conducted, known as a frontal assessment battery screening measure. Can you describe the purpose of that test and your findings as a result of administering it?
The frontal lobe is the lobe that has to do with initiative, drive, and inhibition. And frontal lobe function isn't well tested on the MMSE. So we did the frontal battery, and he again scored well on that. There was no indication of frontal lobe problems. There are particular dementias that affect the frontal lobe, but there was certainly no indication of that with Nguyen Chia.
Thank you. Now, you considered again the criteria for fitness to plead and stand trial, known as the Strugar tests, being a case where they were conveniently summarised and brought together. And in the course of the assessment of Nguyen Chia, you had those various categories or capacities in mind. You decided to administer what you describe as a semi-structured instrument called the Competency to Stand Trial Assessment Instrument. Could you describe what you felt this assessment would achieve and your findings as a result of it?
Well, we focused very much on the criteria that are outlined in the Strugar case, and as part of that, we looked at this particular instrument called the Competency to Stand Trial Assessment Instrument, which we drew on its broad outlines because it details some of the criteria. It gives examples of the sorts of questions or areas that you can examine for each one of the criteria, so in more detail. So it's something that we drew on. It, again, assisted us, but was really an adjunct or an auxiliary set of questions that we drew on that helped us structure our questions. But, as I say, the focus was on the Strugar criteria.
Running through those criteria, what do you have to say about Nguyen Chia's understanding of his guilt or innocence in relation to these charges?
We felt he understood the difference between guilty and not guilty, and we felt that he had a clear view that he did not believe that he was guilty, and he repeated this on a number of occasions throughout our interviews, saying that he denies the charges.
And what about his, your assessment of his basic understanding of the nature of the charges?
We felt he did have a basic understanding. Specifically, we asked him what the charges were, and he said he'd been accused of genocide and war crimes, and he also said that he was aware that crimes against humanity was a common accusation made towards the Khmer Rouge. When we asked him specifically what he understood by these charges, he said to us that genocide meant killing of one's own race. When we asked him about what he understood to be torture, he said that it would include beating and imprisonment, and he used the term maltreatment. And then we asked him about the charge of forced evacuation of people. Again, he said that we had to move people from one place to another. So our view was that that was an understanding of the charges, a basic understanding of that charge. And furthermore, we asked him specifically about what he understood by persecution of peoples. And again, our feeling was that he had a basic understanding of that, and he said that in response to that there were no acts of killing of people, torture of people. And again, our view was that he had an understanding of these charges at a basic level.
Thank you. What conclusion did you come to when you assessed his understanding of court procedures, the role and material provided by witnesses, lawyers, judges, and the ability to comment intelligently on those matters? What do you understand? What level of understanding do you assess him as having?
We thought he had an ability to follow the course of the proceedings. He didn't appear to have any problems understanding questions we put to him over 3 long interviews, and he explained his position quite coherently over our interviews in relation to the charges. He gave consistent and coherent explanations over the 2 days, and he seemed to have a basic understanding of the court process and procedures. He understood the role of the judges, and he understood a decision would be made collectively by the judges. And he even said that he thought that any decision made collectively would be reasonable. And he understood that he would have his legal team represent him. So we thought he had a good understanding of the course of legal proceedings.
You focused also on his capacity to understand details of evidence and to, in effect, instruct or inform counsel of his views of the evidence. What conclusions did you reach under this heading?
Well, we thought he had he understood the details of the evidence, and he was able to put forward his version of events to counsel and discuss that version of the events. So that was the impression we had over our interviews. He gave specific examples of the type of defences that he was planning to raise. And again, these were consistent over the interviews that we conducted. They appeared to us to be coherent. They were intelligible to us. So there was an overall picture in our minds that he was able to understand the details of the evidence and also put forward his version of events.
In that same part of your report, you refer again to the difficulties concerning details of evidence due to his impaired sight, but you also comment on his ability to concentrate. Could you summarise that for the Chamber, please?
Yes. It's really repeating what Professor Campbell said earlier, that he would be able to understand and comprehend material if it's read out to him, or if the reading material is enlarged. And in terms of concentration, based on our interviews, one of which was 2 hours 20 minutes long, we felt that he would be able to concentrate over court sessions and be able to participate meaningfully on the basis of his concentration and his memory.
The next category overlaps with some of your prior findings, but your comments, please, on his ability to cooperate with counsel and instruct counsel in preparation of his defence.
Yes, we were of the opinion that he did have the capacity to instruct counsel and cooperate with his lawyers. He was able to name his national counsel. He explained that his lawyers have helped him, that he was happy with them, that he believed that they were working only for him in this case, and that they were defending him. So he, by that we we came to the opinion that he was able to instruct counsel.
You assessed him also on his understanding of the consequences should a conviction be the outcome of this trial. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, we formed the view that Nunchia had a clear understanding of the consequences of any finding of a trial. He explained that if he was found guilty, one possibility was life imprisonment, and he also added that he wouldn't receive capital punishment because it wasn't part of national law. In addition, he said if he was found not guilty by the court, he said that the court must release him. So he understood that he would be acquitted if he was found not guilty.
Finally, in this segment, you comment on his current ability to testify. Can you summarize for the court, please?
Yes, our feeling was that he did have the ability to testify currently. He understood that he would receive questions from different lawyers, including his defense team, but also the prosecution. He understood that the court was trying to find, in his words, the truth. And he said that he would be willing to speak in court, but did point out that his health made it very difficult for him to do so, and said that as a consequence he would be willing to give evidence on video link.
Overall, in relation to Nguyen Chia's mental health or cognitive abilities, do you have any recommendations to make?
No. His mental health is currently good. His cognitive function is currently good. And we note he listens to the radio. He talks to staff in the detention center, so he maintains a reasonable level of cognitive function, so we have no specific recommendations. However, no, I'm not going to say any more.
President, that concludes the major part of the questions that I wish to put to these two experts. Perhaps if we took the morning break now, and then we can go back over their overall conclusions when we return. Thank you, President.
The President, thank you, Judge Cartwright, and thank you, the experts. It is now appropriate time for the adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn for 20 minutes. Court officer is now instructed to assist the two experts during the adjournment and have them return to the courtroom when the next session resumes.
សូមក្រោកឈរ